The peaceful colony on the edge of the galaxy had always been a quiet place. It was a small, thriving human settlement that had lived in harmony with nature and its surroundings for generations. People went about their daily lives with little concern for the larger galaxy beyond. Life here was simple, but peaceful. The colony had no great armies or advanced weaponry, and the humans didn't need them. They believed in diplomacy, in treaties, and in maintaining good relationships with the rest of the galaxy. But all that was about to change. Far beyond the colony, in the depths of space, something was stirring. The Galactic Federation, a massive alliance of powerful alien species, had always seen humans as insignificant. The humans' peaceful ways were seen as weakness by many of the Federation's races. The Federation believed in strength, in the ability to conquer and dominate. Humanity had never been part of their grand plans. They were too small, too insignificant. But no one had expected the threat that was silently brewing in the dark corners of the galaxy. A mysterious alien race, known only as the Kelthar, had been watching the humans for years. The Kelthar were a fierce and violent species, known for their brutal conquests across the stars. They were a race of warriors, with technology far beyond what most species could imagine, and they had their eyes set on humanity. Their motives were unclear, but they had no intention of peacefully coexisting. The Kelthar wanted to make an example of the humans, to show the galaxy just how easily a peaceful species could be crushed under the weight of their power. The Kelthar fleet, a terrifying armada of warships and fighters, had been slowly moving toward the human colony. Their journey was a silent one. They didn't broadcast their approach, choosing instead to remain hidden in the darkness of space. They knew that the Federation, which controlled much of the galaxy, would not be a threat. The Federation's leaders were busy with their own internal conflicts and had no time to worry about a small human colony on the edge of nowhere. Back on the human colony, everything seemed normal. The settlers were going about their lives, working, farming, building. It was just another day. But in the depths of space, the Kelthar fleet was closing in. A small group of Federation officers, stationed on a remote space station, picked up a strange signal. It was faint at first, just a whisper on their scanners, but it grew stronger with each passing minute. The signal came from a location far beyond the Federation's reach, from a system that was home to the human colony. The officers who intercepted it were seasoned veterans, familiar with all the usual threats in the galaxy, but this was something new. It wasn't a distress signal or a simple communication. It was a warning. The signal, though cryptic, was clear enough. The Kelthar are coming. But even this was not enough to raise alarms across the Federation. The officers who received the message were dismissed. A glitch in the system, they were told. A false alarm. The Federation had never thought much of the humans, and now they thought even less of the warning. If the Kelthar were coming, it wouldn't be a problem. The Federation would deal with it in time. After all, the humans didn't have the strength to stand up to the Kelthar. But the warning was no glitch, and the Kelthar were not the threat the Federation believed them to be. The alien fleet had already arrived in the system. They were on the outskirts, watching the peaceful colony from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. And still the humans had no idea. At the same time, the leader of the colony, a calm and diplomatic woman named Captain Ilara Voss, received a strange, encrypted message. It was a transmission from an old ally, one who had been long forgotten. The message was short but urgent. They are coming. The Kelthar. Prepare yourselves. The Federation will not help you. You must fight for your survival. Ilara stared at the message, confused. Who was sending it? Why now? The Federation had never shown any interest in helping them, and now an unknown ally was warning them about a fleet they hadn't even known existed. But there was no time to question the source. The message was clear. They were in danger, and the Federation's assurances meant nothing. Ilara immediately called for a meeting with the colony's council. The members gathered in the command center, exchanging worried looks. The council was made up of scientists, engineers, and diplomats, people who had never known warfare or conflict. They had always trusted that the galaxy would be a place of peace, a place where they would never need to fight. But the warning message changed everything. "There is a fleet out there, and we are in its path," Ilara said, her voice steady but filled with the weight of responsibility. "We may be a peaceful colony, but we cannot afford to ignore this threat. The Kelthar do not negotiate. They do not offer mercy. We have to act now. The Federation won't come to our aid." The room fell silent as the gravity of the situation set in. No one knew what to do. No one had ever expected a war like this, especially not in their quiet corner of the galaxy. But one thing was clear: they could not simply wait to be destroyed. And so, Ilara ordered the preparations to begin. Weapons were pulled out of storage, old plans for defense were dusted off, and the few ships the colony had were armed and ready for what was coming. The humans might not have the power or experience of the Kelthar, but they had something just as dangerous: their will to survive. The clock was ticking, and the Kelthar fleet was closing in. The fate of the human colony now rested in the hands of a people who had always preferred peace over violence. But one thing was certain: they would not go down without a fight, and the galaxy would soon learn that underestimating humanity would be its greatest mistake. The sky above the human colony grew dark as the first signs of the alien fleet appeared on the distant horizon. It had been days since the warning message arrived, and the colony had been in a frenzy of preparation ever since. There was a sense of unease that hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The colony's leaders, who had once spoken of peace and diplomacy, now found themselves in the harsh reality of war. The humans had always prided themselves on their non-violent ways, their ability to live in harmony with each other and the world around them. They believed that kindness and understanding could solve most problems. But the Kelthar were not creatures of understanding. They were conquerors, driven by a deep need to dominate, to destroy. The humans were about to find out that civility could only go so far when faced with such ruthless brutality. The alien fleet was immense: dozens of warships and hundreds of fighters, all equipped with weapons capable of leveling entire planets. The Kelthar were known for their ability to wipe out entire species with frightening efficiency. Their ships, sleek and deadly, moved silently through space, casting long shadows over the human colony. Despite the overwhelming odds, the humans had already made their decision. They would not surrender. They would fight. But the question was how. The human colony had no army, no trained soldiers, and their ships were no match for the Kelthar's advanced weaponry. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Yet, the humans had one advantage the Kelthar could not foresee: their resourcefulness. Captain Ilara Voss stood on the command deck, looking out at the stars. She felt the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. The colony's survival depended on her decisions now. She had never imagined that she would be in this position, commanding a battle against a ruthless enemy. But here she was, and she had to act quickly. "Gather the council," she ordered, her voice calm but firm. "We need to make our final preparations." The council members, a mix of engineers, strategists, and civilians, gathered around a large table in the command center. Ilara wasted no time explaining the situation. The Kelthar fleet was now within striking distance. It was only a matter of hours before they arrived. "We don't have the luxury of waiting," Ilara said, scanning the faces of her people. "Our only chance is to make the Kelthar believe that we are not an easy target. We have to use the land, the terrain, the environment around us to our advantage. We will not meet them on their terms." The room fell silent as the council absorbed the gravity of her words. They were outmatched, outclassed. But they were not ready to give up. Ilara's plan was bold: guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run operations, and the use of traps and distractions to disrupt the enemy's movements. It was unconventional, but it was all they had. "We will strike at their supply lines, their weak points," Ilara continued. "We won't give them a chance to establish control. Our goal is to make them fear us, to make them doubt their belief that they can simply crush us underfoot. It's the only way we'll survive." The council members nodded. It wasn't much, but it was a plan, and it was the only one they had. Outside, the first waves of Kelthar fighters began to enter the atmosphere. The air was filled with the hum of their engines as they descended toward the planet's surface, their weapons primed for destruction. The humans, however, were ready. They had been working in secret, preparing the land around the colony with hidden fortifications, makeshift defenses, and traps. The Kelthar would not find an easy victory here. As the first Kelthar ships began their assault, firing devastating energy blasts at the surface, the humans struck. They launched their own ships into the sky, engaging in a series of hit-and-run tactics that caught the Kelthar by surprise. The alien ships were fast, but they were not prepared for the cunning and unpredictable nature of human tactics. The humans had learned quickly. They knew their land, their home, and they used every advantage they had to their benefit. They planted explosives in the forests, rigged the mountain passes with hidden mines, and used the terrain to confuse the Kelthar forces. The Kelthar, expecting a quick and easy conquest, was suddenly faced with an enemy who fought back with the same ferocity they were known for. The first few hours of the battle were chaos. The humans and the Kelthar clashed in a brutal exchange of fire. But despite the advanced technology of the aliens, the humans were proving to be a more difficult enemy than anticipated. The Kelthar had underestimated them, believing that humanity's peaceful nature meant they would fold under pressure. But they hadn't counted on humanity's resilience. Ilara watched the battle unfold from the command deck, her heart racing with each explosion that lit up the sky. Her people were fighting with everything they had, and she could see the determination in their eyes. They were scared, yes, but they were also resolute. They would not let their colony fall without a fight. "We have to keep them on the defensive," Ilara ordered, her voice filled with urgency. "We can't let them regroup. Keep the pressure on them. Use everything we've got." As the battle raged on, the Kelthar began to realize that the humans were not as easy a target as they had assumed. Their initial arrogance began to fade, replaced by frustration. The humans were not falling back. They were not running. Instead, they were forcing the Kelthar to fight for every inch of ground. And in that moment, the humans delivered their first deadly lesson to the Kelthar. Never underestimate humanity. It was a lesson the Kelthar would learn the hard way. The battle for the human colony had reached a fever pitch. The sky above was alive with the sound of weapons fire as the Kelthar fleet unleashed wave after wave of destruction upon the planet's surface. Their warships, equipped with devastating laser cannons and powerful energy shields, began to tear through the atmosphere. Yet, despite the overwhelming firepower, the humans had managed to hold their ground. Captain Ilara Voss watched the scenes of destruction unfold from the command center, her mind racing with every decision. The humans had thrown everything they had at the Kelthar, but it wasn't enough. The Kelthar were relentless, and their forces were vast. Even with all their traps and tactics, the humans were still vastly outnumbered. The battle was not over, but with each passing moment, it seemed the odds were stacked higher against them. The alien warriors, known for their brutal efficiency, had begun their ground assault. They moved like a swarm, relentless, cruel, and fast. They knew no mercy. They marched across the surface, destroying everything in their path. Buildings crumbled under their heavy artillery, and entire sectors of the colony were reduced to rubble in seconds. The Kelthar were not concerned with negotiation or surrender. They were here to conquer, and nothing would stand in their way. But the humans, despite being pushed to the edge of extinction, were not done yet. Their greatest strength was not in their numbers or weapons, but in their unyielding spirit. The human fighters, though outclassed by the superior technology of the Kelthar, fought with every ounce of energy they had. They used the terrain to their advantage, hiding in caves, forests, and makeshift bunkers, launching surprise attacks that sent ripples of confusion through the Kelthar ranks. As the humans fought, something began to shift. It wasn't the overwhelming force that changed the tide. It was the strategy, the cleverness, the ability to adapt. In the chaos of battle, the human forces struck at the heart of the Kelthar's supply lines. The Kelthar, for all their strength, had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated the human will to survive. The humans were willing to fight dirty, to take every opportunity and turn it to their advantage. Ilara knew they were running out of time. They had already lost too many good people in the early hours of the battle. The Kelthar were pushing deeper into the colony, and their momentum was unstoppable. The Federation had offered no help, no reinforcements. The humans were alone. If they were to win, it would be on their own terms. Desperation drove the humans to act. Ilara ordered her forces to execute the next phase of their plan, a high-risk assault on the Kelthar flagship. It was the heart of their invasion, and if the humans could take it down, they could cripple the alien fleet. It was a long shot, but it was the only chance they had. A small team of elite human soldiers, including Ilara herself, prepared for a mission that seemed impossible. They would infiltrate the flagship, fight their way through its defenses, and plant explosives at the heart of the ship. It was a suicidal mission, but Ilara knew it was the only way to shift the battle in their favor. The team boarded their small, stealthy ships and flew toward the Kelthar flagship, a massive vessel that loomed like a dark shadow in space. As they approached, the fleet of Kelthar ships above the planet continued their relentless assault, unaware of the humans' daring plan. With precision and speed, the human ships slit through the gaps in the Kelthar defenses, making their way toward the flagship. Inside the flagship, the Kelthar were focused on the destruction below. The last thing they expected was a human strike force on their doorstep. But when Ilara and her team boarded the ship, they hit hard and fast. Their weapons, though less advanced than the Kelthar's, were enough to cause chaos. They fought their way through the corridors, taking down alien soldiers one by one. Every step was a battle, but the humans pressed on. The Kelthar were caught off guard, their usually flawless military discipline unraveling under the surprise attack. The humans, though outnumbered, fought with the ferocity of a species that had nothing left to lose. Ilara's team made it to the heart of the flagship, the command center, where they planted the explosives. The countdown began, and they rushed to evacuate the ship. As the human team made their escape, a massive explosion tore through the flagship. The shockwave rippled through space, and the Kelthar fleet staggered. The heart of their invasion had been destroyed, and chaos erupted among the alien forces. The humans had struck a fatal blow. Back on the planet's surface, the Kelthar forces began to falter. Their morale plummeted as the realization set in. Their flagship, their command center, had been destroyed. The humans had dealt them a devastating blow, one that no amount of firepower could immediately repair. But the battle was far from over. The Kelthar regrouped quickly, launching a new wave of attacks on the colony. They were angry now, more vicious than ever. However, the humans were ready. The destruction of the flagship had bought them time, but it had also given them a chance to organize their forces and prepare for the final confrontation. The Kelthar might be stronger, but the humans had shown them something the aliens had never expected. The humans had learned that survival wasn't just about fighting back. It was about using every resource at your disposal, thinking on your feet, and never giving up. The Kelthar might have underestimated humanity's ability to endure, but now they were about to learn another lesson, the hardest lesson of all. Never push humans to drop their civility. When that line is crossed, they will fight like no other species can, and in that fight, they will show the galaxy that humanity is not to be underestimated. The humans had done it. They had managed to cripple the Kelthar fleet by destroying their flagship, but the cost was high. The human forces were tired, battered, and outnumbered. Many of their fighters were damaged, and the colony was in ruins. Despite their victory, The Kelthar were not about to retreat. The battle was far from over. But there was something different now in the air. The humans had discovered their strength, the power they possessed when they fought for survival. The Kelthar, despite their superior technology, were now faced with something they hadn't expected: resilience. The human spirit could not be crushed so easily. Captain Elara Voss stood in the command center, looking out at the chaos below. The Kelthar had regrouped and were now coming at the humans with all their might, launching coordinated assaults on every remaining stronghold the colony had. The situation was critical, but there was no giving up. Elara had seen the human forces rise, see the strength in each of her people, and she knew there was still hope. The Kelthar had underestimated them once, but they would not make the same mistake again. "We are not done yet," Elara said firmly as she addressed her team. "The Kelthar might think they have us on the ropes, but they don't understand one thing: we don't back down." Her words were met with nods of agreement. Her forces were exhausted, but they had something the Kelthar didn't: unity and determination. Elara quickly devised the next step in their defense: a final, all-out attack to push the Kelthar back and force them to retreat. The battle had been raging for too long, and now it was time to end it. The humans began to prepare for the decisive move. Using the ruins of their city, the remaining soldiers and civilians began fortifying positions in hidden caves, mountain tunnels, and abandoned structures. Their guerrilla tactics had worked before, and now they would put everything they had into this final stand. As the Kelthar made their approach, their forces looked more organized, angrier than ever before. They had seen their flagship destroyed, and now they wanted revenge. They landed their soldiers in waves, massive ground forces advancing through the planet's wreckage. But the humans were ready. The final stand began with a series of explosive distractions. Mines that had been placed in the hills for days now went off, taking down large portions of the Kelthar's advancing ground forces. The human ships launched from hidden hangars in the depths of caves, swooping down in surprise strikes. The Kelthar struggled to adjust to the sudden change in tactics. Elara watched from the command center as the battle raged on. Her heart pounded as the human forces fought with everything they had left. They might have been bruised, battered, and exhausted, but there was fire in them, a fire that could not be extinguished by alien invaders. The Kelthar were pushing forward, trying to reclaim control, but the humans were relentless. Every inch the Kelthar gained was met with fierce resistance. Their massive, armored soldiers, once thought to be unstoppable, were now finding themselves pushed back by the ingenuity of the humans' guerrilla warfare. As the battle continued, something unexpected happened. One by one, more and more Kelthar warships began to pull back. It was as if their will to fight was beginning to fade. They had never expected a fight like this, and now they were beginning to realize that they had made a grave mistake. The humans were not going to give up. Not now, not ever. Elara could feel the change in the atmosphere. Her soldiers were fighting not just for survival, but for something greater: freedom, the right to live, to exist without fear. And as the Kelthar forces began to retreat, she knew that they had won. But the humans weren't finished yet. They knew they couldn't simply let the Kelthar retreat and regroup. There was no telling how many more forces they might have, how much time they could have before the aliens returned. With everything they had, the humans launched the final push to drive the Kelthar off their world for good. The ground forces began to advance again, moving in small, strategic waves, hitting the Kelthar where it hurt the most, on their flanks. The human ships continued to strike, taking out one Kelthar ship after another, forcing the remaining aliens to retreat into space. With each Kelthar warship that fell, the humans felt the power of their unity. They were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for a future. They had no intention of letting the Kelthar return and destroy everything they had worked for. The lesson had been learned, not just by the Kelthar, but by the humans as well. Never take peace for granted, and never underestimate what humanity is capable of. The last wave of Kelthar ships broke off and retreated into space. The battle was over, and the humans had won. It had been a close fight, one that had taken everything from them, but they had proven something important to the galaxy. Never push humans to drop their civility. When the time came, they could fight like no other species. Captain Ilara Voss stood at the command center, her eyes on the horizon. The colony was in ruins, but the people had survived. They had held their ground, and they had shown the Kelthar and the galaxy at large what humanity was capable of. The road ahead would not be easy. Rebuilding would take years, but for the first time in a long while, the humans had hope. The galaxy had learned a deadly lesson: never underestimate humanity. And for the Kelthar, it was a lesson they would never forget. The aftermath of the battle was quiet, yet tense. The human colony, once thriving with life, was now reduced to a scarred wasteland. The air was filled with the acrid smell of smoke and the distant sound of fires still smoldering. Yet, despite the destruction, the humans had won. The Kelthar, after suffering heavy losses and retreating in disarray, were gone, at least for now. Captain Ilara Voss stood at the front of what remained of the colony, her eyes scanning the horizon. The human forces had given everything to protect their home, and the price of that victory was steep. But in the midst of the devastation, there was something else, a sense of triumph. It was a feeling that had been hard-earned, one that would never be forgotten. The Kelthar had come to conquer, to crush the humans under their boots. They had underestimated humanity's will to survive, its unrelenting drive to protect its people, and its deep-rooted desire to fight for a future. The Kelthar had learned a hard lesson. Humanity, when pushed to the edge, was not something to be trifled with. But the war was not yet over. The Kelthar had retreated, but they were not gone for good. Ilara knew that they would be back. The galaxy would not forget what had happened here. And the Kelthar, though wounded, would eventually regroup and strike again. But the humans were ready. They had shown the Kelthar that they were a force to be reckoned with, that they would fight with everything they had to protect their world. In the wake of the battle, Ilara gathered her leaders for a final meeting. The council, a mix of military commanders and civilian leaders, had seen their city fall, but had never lost faith. They were tired, battered, and in many cases grieving the loss of loved ones. But they had also proven something important: that they could stand together, that they could rise above even the most insurmountable odds. "We've won, but the war isn't over," Ilara said, her voice firm and resolute. "The Kelthar will come back. We can't let our guard down. Our victory today has proven that we're not helpless, but we have to be prepared for what's next." The council nodded, and there was a quiet resolve among them. The humans had not just fought for their lives, they had fought for a future, and that was something worth protecting. "We'll rebuild," one of the council members, a civilian engineer named Tessa, said. "We'll make sure our defenses are stronger. We'll create new technologies, better strategies, and most importantly, we'll never forget what we've learned." Ilara nodded, proud of the strength her people had shown. It's time to rebuild, to become stronger than before. But we also need to send a message. The galaxy needs to know that humanity is not a species that will fall easily. And if the Kelthar think they can simply come back and finish what they started, they'll find that we're ready for them. The council discussed their next steps, and despite the devastation around them, there was an undeniable sense of unity. The humans had been pushed to their breaking point, but they had held firm, and now they were determined to rebuild their strength and prepare for whatever the galaxy might throw at them. Elsewhere in the colony, the survivors began the long, difficult process of recovery. People salvaged what they could from the wreckage, establishing makeshift camps and organizing to help those who had lost everything. It was a painful, exhausting process, but it was necessary. The humans had to prove that they were not just fighters, they were survivors, and they would rebuild. Weeks passed, and the repairs began in earnest. The humans worked tirelessly, using their ingenuity to repair their ships, rebuild their defenses, and bring life back to the desolate planet. They had learned valuable lessons during the war, lessons about strength, resilience, and the power of unity. Elara stood on a hill overlooking the colony as the sun began to set. She could see the new structures taking shape, the foundations of a future being built. The humans were not defeated. Far from it. They were stronger than ever. The Kelthar would return one day, but next time, the humans would be ready. They had shown the galaxy that they were not a species to be crushed underfoot, not a race to be overlooked or underestimated. The Kelthar had learned their lesson the hard way, and now the rest of the universe would learn it too. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with, and the galaxy would never forget the deadly lesson they had been taught. Never push humans to drop their civility. When humans fight, they fight with everything they have, and when all seems lost, they will rise again. As Elara watched the sun dip below the horizon, a new hope flickered in her heart. The battle was over, but the war for humanity's future had only just begun. And with that, the humans began their march into the future, unbroken, undeterred, and more determined than ever to make sure their lesson was never forgotten.